Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Counterpoint Research Podcast. Today we have a special guest joining us from mAh. mAh, as you may know, has been a quality benchmarking firm that scientifically assesses many different aspects of smartphones. I guess it's most well known for its smartphone camera scores. But recently, and I think in an excellent move, mAh has added batteries to the mix. So here to introduce and talk about testing batteries and batteries for smartphones in general is mAh's battery unit director, Olivier Simon. Olivier, thanks very much for talking to us today, and it's great to have you.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and thank you for having me.
So, Olivier, we were talking just before we started recording the podcast here that we've both been around the mobile industry for a long time, but maybe you'd like to quickly introduce to listeners your extensive history.
Yeah, sure. I like to say that when I started in the telecom industry, France didn't have any star on their football jacket. But yeah, I'm an engineer in electronics and computer. I spent, as we just said, most of my career in the telecoms, starting at Philips Consumer Communications, then Gem Plus. LG for about 10 years, including a rotation of a year and a half in the headquarters in Seoul. And more recently, I was the CTO for Wiko, a French mobile phone brand. So, yeah, I'm very familiar with all the challenges that the OEMs face when designing and developing new mobile phones.
Excellent. Well, great to have you with us. And yeah, so mAh, I've been following particularly the smartphone camera ratings for many years, and I truly rely on them. And I think that the testing protocols that you go through, the best in the industry. And as I say, you've started now with battery scoring, and I think that started in sort of the springtime, May time this year, right? So what was the main driver for covering the battery space as well?
Yeah, well, as you correctly said, yes, DxOMark has many years of expertise in assessing camera quality, and not only smartphone cameras, by the way. They also are experts in audio for 2 or 3 years now. We launched a display score last year, and yes, this is correct. We've just released our brand new battery score in May this year after a very intensive full year of developments. And why did we go for battery? Well, battery is always challenged. So uh, battery needs to cope with growing demand for data, for computing power. Smartphones always come with new features, continue to bring more screen pixels, even sometimes more than one screen. And it's a balance, and battery life, battery experience is always challenged. And without battery there's no experience at all, right? So yeah, and from a user perspective, well, usually he will be presented with milliamp hours or watts, and it's not really straightforward as an information to grasp for anyone. So yes, we know that there is a need for an independent benchmark that users can trust to deliver an unbiased, transparent, and comprehensive battery test. And our goal was to compare all brands in the same way, so that we can guide the end users in their buying decision with our battery score.
Excellent. Yeah. So, I mean, certainly, I think in the consumer research that we do, when we ask consumers what they like and what they dislike about their smartphone, battery life is often near the top of the items that they dislike. So it's a clear pain point. Now, Counterpoint tracks smartphones, and we do a lot of analysis of the specifications. So we pull out the milliamp hour associated with each smartphone. So to us, it's a spec, it's a number. But and we also look at recharging protocols as well, whether it's wired or high speed charging or wireless charging. So thinking about milliamp per hour, for example, what does it really mean? Is that, can I just sort of say, okay, this is 5,000 milliamp per hour, so it's going to be better than this one, which is only 3,500?
Well, yes and no. Actually, yeah, milliamp hours, a unit that measures the charge capacity of your battery. It's a bit like the number of liters in your gas tank for your car. So yeah, when you talk milliamp hours, it's like if you're going in a garage and the sales guy is telling you this car has a 60-liter gas tank, this car has 40-liter gas tank. You don't really know what it's going to drive you to, right? So it's similar for the smartphone. The milliamp hours describe the amount of capacity you have in your smartphone, but the autonomy will depend on a lot of factors. It will depend on screen resolution, it will depend on your chipset and modem, quality of antennas, hardware integration, software optimization. Since the launch in May, we've already measured 50 smartphones, and among them, 20 share the exact same 5,000 milliamp hour battery capacity. And what we measure is that the autonomy they bring ranges from 41 hours to 85 hours. So there's a big disparity among those 5,000 milliamp hour battery we've measured. And it's a bit similar for the watts information that come with your charger spec. The watts are the maximum power delivered by the charger. It's a bit similar to the speed at which you can fill up your gas tank in your car. But it's only the peak power of the charger, and this peak cannot be maintained throughout the charging process. At some points, you have to slow down the charging speed to keep the battery cooled and safe. And so, we start to see 120 watt chargers coming, but actually, the 120 watts are only kept for a few seconds in order to keep the battery safe. We've also measured some 30-watt chargers, which actually never deliver more than 25. So yeah, those are specs, and it gives an indication, but it doesn't translate immediately in an experience. And of course, your experience will depend a lot on your usage and your charging rituals.
Mm. Yeah, and that sort of brings us on to the question of the procedures that you go through to test these, because as you say, everyone is different, right? So you live in a different, radio environment. You may be very far from a base station or very close to a base station, or you may use Wi-Fi 90% of the time, or all these sort of things, and maybe have the screen brightness set at a different level. So how do you actually kind of go about trying to factor all this into a reasonable testing protocol?
Yeah, and this is a great question. Yes. So when designing a protocol at Dixomark, we always use a very consistent approach, and it's always been the same for camera, audio, or display, as well as battery. We first start by analyzing, the way people use their phones. So we try to understand their habit, what they expect, what are the pain points that they face. And once we're very familiar with that, we design a protocol that reproduces in our labs and also going outdoors, that reproduce these habits in a very robust environment to design a repeatable protocol. So for battery, for example, our testing protocols involves up to 150 hours of testing. So that means 150 hours of both charging, discharging the phone, that results in about 70 measures, which combined into 100 parameters that all contribute to our battery score. So I'd like to quickly explain here those 70 measurements. 30 of them are autonomy measurements. And these autonomy we combine with battery capacity to calculate the discharge current. So what is a discharge current? It's the ratio of battery capacity over autonomy, and it measures the speed at which a specific usage will drain your battery. So for example, if I have a 5,000 milliamp hour device which brings 10 hours of video playback, for example, it means that the discharge current for this platform is 5,000 milliamp hours divided by 10 hours, that's 500 milliamps. And yet, if I have a different device with 4,000 milliamp hours, for example, bringing the same 10 hours of autonomy, then the discharge current is just 400 milliamps. So they will bring the same autonomy for the use case. We just measure the speed at which they drain the battery, in this case, 500 milliamps versus 400 milliamps. So this is how all these 70 measurements become 100 parameters, taking into account those discharge currents.
Okay. And what about the radio environment? Because you said earlier that the baseband system, the antenna quality, and so on also has a big impact. I mean, a smartphone is a complex system, right? So you're not ever just doing one. There's not ever just one application running. There's a whole suite of radio and activities going on in the background. So how do you kind of manage the environment such that all phones are measured in a similar way?
Yeah, well, so the first thing, our lab is based in France, next to Paris. And yeah, the phones we test will attach to a French network, of course. So we cannot test each and every network combination out there from our lab in Paris. An Indian network operator or Verizon or in the US, we test on one French carrier network, which is Orange France. And yes, you're right. The network conditions can be fluctuating. So to cope with that, our lab is actually a Faraday cage. So a Faraday cage will isolate the device on the test in a totally controlled environment, spare them from any external disturbances. On the rooftop of our building, we have an antenna pointing at an orange post, and a network repeater is sending a robust network, which is constant inside the Faraday cage, so that the network conditions every day will be identical inside the cage where we test the phones. We also have inside the Faraday cage, of course, a Wi Fi access point because some of the usages we test are on cellular, some are on Wi-Fi, as you said. We also control the lighting conditions inside the Faraday cage. Actually, we've designed 4 test plans, 2 of which are run inside this Faraday cage. So the first one is called a typical usage scenario. And inside the Faraday cage, we have a few robots. We have some robotic fingers that will actually perform actions on the touch panel of your phone, just like you use your phone, just like everyone is using your phone by doing clicks and swipes on the touch panel. And in our typical usage scenario, the robots will play a scenario that starts at 7 a.m. in the morning, will finish at p.m. in the night, and will implement clicks and swipes to browse the internet, play games, check social networks, make phone calls in a scenario that has about 4 hours of screen on time per day. Then there is a night, and in the next morning, the robots will continue the exact same test scenario, the exact same routine until the battery dies. And that first test plan gives us the autonomy you can expect on a full battery when you're an average user. Of course, mobile phones are mobile, so we also take them outdoor for mobility tests. And here we'll test the autonomy you can expect in specific usages of users when they're on the go, like GPS navigation or shooting photos and videos, again, making phone calls and checking social networks, basically. Those 2 first test plans are done with factory default settings. So these 2 first test plans will measure the out-of-box experience you can expect on any new smartphone. The third test plan is also done inside the Faraday cage. And here we will calibrate all device settings. The screen brightness is calibrated, the sound pressure level of the speakers is calibrated, the refresh rate of the screen is calibrated, so that we measure all phones on the same foot, providing a similar user experience. And here we'll measure each and every possible usage of a smartphone, like again, making phone calls, streaming video over Wi Fi, cellular, gaming. And those 3 test plans will provide us an array of autonomy measurements. And we complement those tests with a third test plans about charging, of course. And here we'll measure the time and energy that is required to go from a fully depleted battery to a fully charged battery. But it's not really a user experience. Usually, you will always plug your phone before it powers down, right? So we also check how much autonomy you recover in a quick 5-minute power top up of your battery at different state of the battery when the battery percent indicator shows 20%, 40%, 60%, and 80%. So those are our first 4 test plans, measuring autonomies and charging experience. Yeah, again, 70 measurements and 150 hours of test.
Yeah, sounds extremely comprehensive. But I'm glad to hear that it sounds like the robots get a night's sleep at least. So,
Yeah. Yeah. and they also have a lot of fun playing games and checking their social networks.
Maybe you should get them a social network account that they can publish some of their thoughts to.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Olivia. So it sounds like there are three key attributes that you're testing. So autonomy, how long the battery, lasts doing certain activities, charging method, so how long it takes both to recharge fully but also to top up battery from a certain point. And then I think, which to me is the most interesting, is the efficiency. So, how well the device uses its store of current to manage certain activities. But do you apply a particular weighting on how each of these factors is considered?
Yeah, so all our autonomy measurements contribute to the autonomy subscore that contributes to the global battery score. So this autonomy subscore has the biggest weight. It has the weight of 3. Yeah, for several reasons. One of them being that, yeah, there are still many people out there who have the habit to charge their phone overnight. A few years back, actually, we had no choice but power up the phones every night because they had a hard time making it throughout the day. So still, autonomy remains the key factor for us with the biggest weight of 3. Then charging has the weight of 2 because we say that whatever your charging ritual, there will be occasions like, a long weekend or a business trip or a special event where you will need to rely on quick power boost to make sure that you can continue your journey. So charging has the weight of 2. And efficiency actually is not entirely a user experience. It's measured both in the efficiency of a full charge, so meaning how much energy is needed to fill up the energy capacity of your battery. And it's also measured by, like you said, the efficiency when in use or the speed at which the battery is drained. And yes, so this efficiency subscore has a weight of 1. Still, it's very important for the XOMark. What we say is that, an efficient device will provide a better autonomy with a smaller battery. And actually it translates into an immediate benefit for the user that a smaller battery provides good autonomy means it's a sexier design. It's also a sign for us of a better quality of build. So, an efficient device is built with power efficient components. There's special care that has been made for the hardware integration, software integration. So, it's, in a word, it's more optimized and a sign of a better quality. And the third one, well, efficiency is key for us because actually it saves electricity and, it's good for the planet.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't so long ago that, I mean, particularly users of certain devices, you would find them the middle of the day hunting for a power source because, the phone would not last a full day. Thankfully, I think, those days are more or less behind us, although it still occurs sometimes.
Yes, exactly. I've had a recent story of a colleague trying to plug a phone in the toilets of an airport to try and and continue the journey.
Yeah, so it's those sort of odd situations maybe, but in general use, I think most phones now last a day. One of the things that we talked about a little bit beforehand that I think must be very difficult to test is the durability of batteries, and I think this is becoming important for many. Even at the sort of government level, we've just been through this COP26, and as you say, the environment is an important factor. So that the ability for a battery to last a long time in terms of years or number of charge recharge cycles, but I guess that's very difficult to test, right?
Yes, of course, it's my dream to be able to test it and to test it fast. But unfortunately, there's no easy way yet. Actually, you still need to drain the battery and charge and drain and charge for a number of cycles before you start to see the erosion and to give and to anticipate what the durability of this battery will be. And it takes 100 or 150 cycles, and you have to do soft cycles, otherwise you damage the battery more. So you can only do maximum 2 cycles per day. So 150 cycles is an awful amount of time for us. But definitely, it's something that I dream of doing, and I'm probably going to add to my protocol in the near future.
So, kind of moving ahead to the results that you've seen so far. I've looked at these, and there's the thing that sort of stands out for me is that there's not so much correlation between price and performance in the battery scores. I mean, in the camera domain, you can see. I mean, obviously there are exceptions, but on average, the more you pay for a smartphone, the better the camera is. But that doesn't seem to be the case here in the battery scores.
Yeah, well, yeah, as you can expect, devices in more premium segments have bigger screens, have more things to handle. Yeah, so in our top scores, the in the first two places, I have two devices belonging to our high-end segment, which is between 400 and $600. So the Oppo Reno 6 and the Realme GT Neo 2 are the first two devices in my rankings. Then number three, I have four different devices. The iPhone 13 Pro Max, which is an ultra premium device, starting at a bit more than $1,000. And I also have two advanced devices, so between 200 and 400 device, the OnePlus Nord C 5G and the Vivo Y72 5G. And again, another high-end device, the Xiaomi 11T at 499. I have to say that also in my top 10, I have also two essential devices, which are device priced below 200. But actually, there is a form of correlation. Usually, the higher end device will struggle with autonomy because they bring a lot of fancy features, many screen pixels, but they also catch up with fast charging. And on the other end, in the lower end, more affordable smartphones with less pixels on the screens, less features will provide usually a good autonomy, but on the other hand, they will struggle with charging time. So, actually, in our rankings, in the middle, the high end device, which both start to democratize fast charge and have a better balance of specs, are very well represented in our rankings.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So I guess it sort of highlights the fact that there's no kind of straightforward way to kind of correlate price and performance because there's so many other things going on as we talked about earlier. A smartphone is a system device, and all of those components in the system contribute to the power use, power drain, but also I guess efficiency, and maybe we can come and talk about some of those in a minute. But maybe a good point here is to what advice would you give to OEMs? You've worked for smartphone makers. What would you advise them in terms of how to optimize the battery performance?
Yes. So first, of course, it's a careful selection of components. So the CPU, the screen mainly must be power efficient, good design of antennas to also have a low cost on data. The biggest pain point, for example, is the pixel. So the more pixels, the higher refresh rates, they will have a direct impact on your autonomy. It's not only a challenge for the number of pixels that need to be lit, it's also the challenge of the full UI, and the full UI that needs to run on more pixels, requiring more computation, more RAM. And for that reason, some OEMs will, launch a smartphone with Quad HD resolution, but by default, will offer a full HD UI, for example. Yeah, and of course, one of the key one point to really take pay attention to is the quality of the modem and antennas, and focus on trying and providing the lowest discharge rate possible when idle, because as a user, when you're not using your phone, you expect it that it doesn't drain your battery, which of course is not true. As you said, it's a living thing. It's a very complex system, and it's always grooming things in the background, doing a bit of stuff, staying connected to the network to get your notifications or whatever. But yeah, having a great low power consumption during idle time is also key. to provide a good experience.
Excellent. So, yeah, interesting that you mentioned the software and hardware integration. I think you mentioned that earlier as well. And so, Android has powers a huge number of phones. iOS obviously is just with Apple, and I think one of the things that you've highlighted is that given that Apple manages both the software and hardware and works on a very integrated way, the products tend to be very efficient. But can we make any sort of generalizations about whether iOS is better at some things or Android is better at others? Gaming, for example.
Well, so in the database that we have of measurements, we have four iOS phones, and actually, those four iOS phones are all on the top of our score for efficiency in discharge. So they have the lowest current drains in most situations, and as you said, this is easier for Apple. They are doing the chipset, they are doing specifying the hardware, making the hardware design, they have the OS, of course, and most of the apps as well. So it does show in all our measurements, and the top spots for the discharge score are all trusted by Apple phones with a minimum of 115 points, when the best Android has 104. What we see also is that Android is progressing. So we saw significant progress brought by Android 11 versus Android 12, and we start to measure Android 12 as they are released. So I think we have all the Pixels, of course, supporting Android 12, a few Samsung as well that will start measuring, and other device coming up. Yeah, we'll have to have another chat at some point in time to see the benefits of Android 12 versus Android 11. Regarding benefits of each and every device, actually, in terms of autonomies, the Apple phones come with usually smaller batteries compared to Android phones. So overall, in autonomy, there's no clear winner on who is providing the best experience between Android and Apple. But we see in the performance of the platform itself that Apple is ahead.
Yeah, so I guess because they have that better efficiency, they can manage with a smaller battery. I guess helps from a cost point of view, both in terms of dollar cost, but also in environmental cost as well. And I guess one of the other kind of key components in the system, and interesting, we had Qualcomm launching their new application processor for the high end. So, do the different AP processor manufacturers, do they have a big impact on the overall battery performance? And if so, which players do better than others?
Yes, we have an extensive database of measurements now, so we start to see trends. But it's very difficult to evaluate and compare those chipset solutions in a fair comparison because, as you said, they always come. What we test is always coming in a very rich system, which will have different screen size, different hardware integration, different features. So it's really very difficult to compare chipsets one to another in a very precise manner. But except maybe for the Samsung Galaxy S21 series, where they come in two flavors. One is on the homemade Exynos platform, and the other one is on a Qualcomm. And yet we measure both, and we still see that Exynos is slightly behind Qualcomm for that. The autonomy score of the S21 Exynos is of 51, and the Snapdragon version, providing the exact same hardware, is 4 points ahead with a score of 55 for autonomy. If I try and compare MediaTek and Qualcomm, there's a very, very small gap, I think. If I filter by all the devices having a full HD resolution, so 1080p screen width, then it's kind of a fair comparison. The best MediaTek device is the Vivo Y72 5G, coming with the Dimensity 700 5G from MediaTek. And the overall efficiency in discharge, the overall score is 103 points. And in the same width, the best Qualcomm is on Snapdragon 750G 5G, which comes on the OnePlus Nord C 5G. And this one has 104 points. So you see very, very similar performance. The Dimensity chips is ahead of the Qualcomm in most usages, except that Qualcomm is better for all video usages. In a similar way, if I compare from Oppo, the Reno 6, which is our current top score, with its bigger brother, the Reno 6 Pro. The Reno 6 comes with Dimensity 900 from MediaTek, and it has the same discharge efficiency score of 103, same like the Dimensity 700 on the 6 Pro comes on a Snapdragon 875, and it comes with a discharge score of 94. So here comparison is not totally fair because Renault 6 Pro will bring more features compared to Renault 6. But actually, even there, if I just focus on all the video usages, the average current drain in video for the Renault 6 Pro is 229 milliamps, which is ahead of the Dimensity 900 chip of the Renault 6, which comes with 274, so a bit more, 50 something milliamp more in video usages. So we do see in our database some capacities and some differences between those solution vendors. And again, yeah, the Apple A14, A15 Bionic chipsets by Apple, well, I cannot compare them head to head with the other CPUs because they come with their own environment, own OS, own chipsets, own apps. But in all usages, they're ahead.
Yeah, and I think your answer to the complexity here, and that certain applications, will perform slightly better on some and slightly worse on others, but you have to again take this whole system into consideration. So, I think we've probably done as much as we can here in this discussion to unpick the complexities, but also to highlight the great work that you're doing. So, thanks, Olivier.
Well, thank you very much, Peter.
Yeah, just before we wrap up, obviously we're kind of heading into one of the peak sales seasons, in many parts of the world. So, any last thoughts for listeners as they're, maybe looking to buy a new smartphone for themselves or for a loved one?
Yeah, well, to conclude, I would like to stress out again the fact that milliamp hours are not totally relevant and definitely should not guide your buying decision. I think as I said earlier, you don't buy your car based on the size of the gas tank, right? So I think you should. Yeah, I encourage people to go check out our reviews on dxomark.com to find clear information on the overall battery experience you can expect with your next smartphone. As we said, you should check the overall score, but you can also go down into more details and the sub-scores of autonomy, charging, and efficiency. And you'll see that we also provide direct and straightforward information. For example, the charging time. So you will know how much capacity you recover in 30 minutes, how long it takes to go from 0 to 80% of a full charge, how long it takes to go to a full charge. Very straightforward autonomy per profile. So that gives you a kind of range, depending on your usage, of the autonomy you can expect. So we'll provide you with a light usage profile, which is 2.5 hours of screen on per day, moderate usage profile, which gives the autonomy you can expect when you have about 4 hours of screen on per day, and an intense usage profile with 7 hours of screen on time per day. So depending on your usage, you will have a good expectation of where the autonomy experience will be in your case.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So that was Olivier Simon from DxOMark. Thanks, Olivier, for your time today. Really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you very much, Peter. Always a pleasure.
All right. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and please subscribe to Counterpoint Podcast for any future editions, and check back. And we wish you a great day. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.